When someone's got a cardiac arrest, you've got to act fast. You do chest compressions to keep their brain oxygenated until help arrives to defibrillate their heart and restore its rhythm. You stop the bleeding before worrying about a broken bone. I was sat on the patio, clueless about what to do first. This was a new situation for me and I felt blindsided. As a critical care nurse, I'd honed my observation skills. I could spot subtle signs of a patient's decline and act swiftly, often saving lives. Yet I missed the warning signs of my nearly 18, when my marriage ended. I didn't plan on saving it. I wanted to end it painfully. But then I thought again, and I didn't want to hurt anyone. So I took a sip of beer and thought about what to do. I looked around my backyard. The lawn stretched from the patio to the bayou, with only a few trees. My house was a traditional-style home with modern amenities. It was a gift from my father and grandfather when I got engaged. The land had been in their family for generations when my marriage ended. I didn't want to save it. I wanted to end it painfully. After thinking about it, I didn't want to hurt anyone when I targeted my cheating wife and her lover. I took a sip of beer and thought about my options. Looking around my backyard, the lawn stretched from the patio to the bayou, with only a few trees. My house, a traditional-style home with modern amenities, was a gift from my father and grandfather when I got engaged. The land had been in my family for generations, and the house was built by my family's construction company. I chose nursing over joining the business, despite my father's initial disappointment. I could afford some luxuries, like a boat and fishing gear, and took my family on vacations when I could. Family was my priority, and now their happiness was at risk. Looking around, I saw my sister's identical house next door. I called her over. "We need to talk. Isn't it early for a drink, Rob? It's only 2 p.m. She said, "I noticed your beer, so I'm off for the weekend. I'm in the mood." I replied that she knew my work schedule allowed for frequent time off. I preferred having a cooler of beer nearby to avoid trips to the fridge. I offered her a drink and she sat down. "What's so urgent?" she asked. "Susan, you told me not to call anyone before talking to you. I found out that Bonnie is cheating on me." I said, "My. How's it going?" she asked, noticing my beer. "I'm off for the weekend. I'm in the mood." I replied. "I know, I'm on the clock a lot, but I like having a beer on hand to avoid the fridge." I offered her a beer. She sat down. "What's up?" she asked. "You told me not to call anyone before talking to you. I found out Bonnie's cheating on me." I said, my voice shaking. "Are you sure? Maybe it's a cruel joke," she asked. I nodded. "There was a video attached." "No doubt. Who sent it?" "I don't know," I replied. "The email said you should know your wife is cheating. Here's proof." The sender was pissed off. $9.99. Susan was furious that the cheating cow doesn't know you'll destroy her and her lover. "Do you know who the guy is?" I nodded, ready to voice shaking. She asked, "Are you sure? Maybe it's a cruel joke." I nodded. "There's a video attached." "No doubt. Who sent it?" "I don't know." I replied. "The email said you should know, your wife is cheating. Here's proof." The sender was pissed off. $9.99. Susan was furious that cheating cow doesn't she? She doesn't know you'll destroy her and her lover, do you? I nodded, ready to respond, but she cut me off. "If Rich ever cheated on me, I'd destroy him. How does Bonnie even find time to have an affair? She's home almost every night except for bachelorette parties, where I'm always present. She works with Rich, and they usually drive together. He would notice if she was having fun." Susan paused, noticing my shocked expression. "No way," she exclaimed. "She's." I told her that if Rich ever cheated on me, I'd destroy him. She said that how does Bonnie even find time to have an affair? She's home almost every night except for bachelorette parties, where I'm always there. She works with Rich and they usually drive together. He would notice if she was having fun. Susan paused, noticing my shocked expression. "No way. she exclaimed. They're cheating on us with each other. Her face turned red and tears welled up. I'm sorry, I wanted to tell you, I said, hugging her. I've had a couple of hours to calm down enough not to grab a weapon. She cried briefly, then composed herself. You're okay. What do we do? Wait for them and then confront them, she asked. I love him, but I'm not tolerating cheating on my husband with each other, they're cheating on us. Her face went red and tears welled up. I apologized, saying gently, I wanted to tell you. I've had a couple of hours to calm down enough not to grab a weapon. She cried briefly, then composed herself. Okay, what do we do? Wait for them and then confront them. I asked, I love him, but I'm not tolerating this. We need to be smart. I'll act normal tonight, just like yesterday. We'll greet them with a kiss. Susan frowned. Are you serious? We need a plan. We should get legal advice tomorrow at least. At least we know we haven't contracted any STDs. I added with a smirk to lighten the mood. Susan pointed at me. Hell no. I didn't even consider that. You know me. I might joke about becoming a TV. Look, we need to be smart here. Just act normal tonight, like you did yesterday. We'll greet them with a kiss. Susan looked unimpressed. Are you serious? We need a plan. We should get some legal advice tomorrow at least. At least we know we haven't caught any STDs, right? I added, trying to lighten the mood. Susan pointed at me. Hell no. I didn't even consider that. You know me. I might joke about becoming a TV star, but I'd never actually do it. She finished her beer and threw the can away. I handed her another, just for the record, I'm not doing anything with Rich. I just got my period. She laughed. This will last until we confront those cheaters. He's not getting anything from me. Bonnie can have him, and we mustn't let the kids know yet. I warned them, they left for Mom and Dad's place. Bonnie laughed and said, this'll last until we confront those cheaters. He's not getting anything from me. Bonnie can have him, and we mustn't let the kids know yet. I warned them that they left for Mom and Dad's place. This morning, they took their time, but didn't argue or ask questions. They just got in Jason's car and drove off. The kids, my son Jason, 17, Rob, 16, Dave, 16, and Cindy, 16, and my daughter Deary, 16, spent the entire summer together. They were more like siblings than cousins, especially during the pandemic, when they were always together. Rich had been a good father and uncle. This morning, they were all pretty relaxed, no one was arguing or asking questions, they just jumped in Jason's car and drove off. The kids, my son Jason, 17, Rob, 16, Dave, 16, and Cindy, 16, and my daughter Deary, 16, spent the whole summer together. They were more like siblings than cousins, especially during the pandemic when they were always together. Rich had been a good father and uncle. I was the one who handled the kids' education and activities. I took them out on the water, teaching them camping, fishing and hunting. We'd camp in the backyard, and then gradually venture deeper into the swamp as the kids grew. They'd join in fishing trips, often with Rich or Susan driving the second boat. Recently, Rich let his sons handle his boat while he stayed home. The kids learned to be self-sufficient. When it came to the kids' education and activities, I was the one who handled the outdoor stuff, like teaching them camping, fishing and hunting. We'd start in the backyard and then move deeper into the swamp as the kids grew. They'd often join in fishing trips, often with Rich or Susan driving the second boat. Recently, Rich let his sons handle his boat while he stayed home. The kids learned to be self-reliant, finding their own food on trips and working together as a team. They were tough and valued family and teamwork. 3 weeks ago, I rearranged my work schedule to get 6 days off in a row. I took the girls in one boat and the boys went in another. We traveled slowly to avoid snags and shallow water, stopping occasionally so everyone could take turns driving. We spent a week at the old Pooh Fish Camp fishing and catching crabs, and we bonded. Reliant found their own food on trips and worked together as a team. They were tough and valued family and teamwork. 3 weeks ago, I rearranged my work schedule to get 6 days off in a row. I took the girls in one boat and the boys went in another. We traveled slowly to avoid problems in shallow water, stopping occasionally so everyone could take turns driving. We spent a week at the old fish camp, fishing and catching crabs. We bonded as a family, or so I thought. Apparently Bonnie and Rich didn't value family unity. The thought of telling the kids about Bonnie and Rich's affair was heartbreaking. Family was everything to me, and destroying that unity would be unforgivable. I expressed this to Susan. "We can't hide it from them," she said. "But we can delay it a bit. I'll make sure they don't know anything is wrong." What do we do next? I can't forgive or forget infidelity. I told Susan that no matter what Bonnie says, I can't forgive or forget infidelity. I can tolerate a lot, but not cheating. I need to figure out how to get rid of her without losing everything. I won't risk jail or let her take the kids. I can't hurt Rich either. I have to be there for the kids. I opened another beer. I get it. We need to break him financially. I'm going to take every penny I can get, including child support and alimony. I agreed that Rich earned more, so Susan had no matter what Bonnie says, I replied. Susan agreed. I can tolerate a lot, but not cheating. I need to figure out how to get rid of her without losing everything. I won't risk jail or let her take the kids. I can't hurt Rich either. I have to be there for the kids. I opened another beer. I get it. We need to break him financially. I'm going to take every penny I can get, child support, alimony, everything. I agreed. Rich earned more, so Susan had a better chance. Bonnie could drive me to the penitentiary, as courts often favor women in divorce cases. In my job, I handle trusts and wills, but I know enough about the law to say our assets are protected. Susan said our houses are safe. Dad gave them to us before we got married, so Bonnie and Rich can't claim them. Bonnie might try to stay in your house until the kids are grown, but she can't claim it. Didn't you and Bonnie sign a prenuptial agreement? Dad insisted. It said that if either of us cheated, we'd only get 20% of the joint assets, and no alimony. Bonnie's dad, a rich plastic surgeon, had insisted on the prenup. He wasn't happy when I got his daughter pregnant, as he was worried I'd take half his money. My dad also made Susan and Rich sign a similar agreement. I'm worried about that video of Rich and Bonnie. Susan said who filmed it, and that there were at least 3 cameras. I said the video I showed you. It said that if either of them cheated, they'd only get 20% of the shared assets, and no alimony. Bonnie's dad, a rich plastic surgeon, had insisted on the prenup. He wasn't happy when I got his daughter pregnant, as he was worried I'd take half his money. My dad also made Susan and Rich sign a similar agreement. I'm worried about that video of Rich and Bonnie. Susan said who filmed it and how there were at least 3 cameras. I said the video I showed the same event from different angles, so it wasn't edited yet. Neither Rich nor Bonnie seemed to know they were being recorded. Susan insisted that I show her the video on my tablet. Oh my God, she exclaimed. Rich and Bonnie's comments in the video about how Susan and I were clueless infuriated her. Rich is done, but we need to find out who made the video. I don't want it coming back to haunt us. I don't care if the world sees. I showed Susan the video, which was filmed from different angles, suggesting it hadn't been edited yet. Neither Rich nor Bonnie seemed to know they were being recorded. Susan insisted I show her the video on my tablet. Oh my God, she exclaimed. Rich and Bonnie's comments in the video about how Susan and I were clueless infuriated her. Rich is done, but we need to find out who made the video. I don't want it coming back to haunt us. I don't care if the world sees it, as long as it doesn't affect us. I agreed, suggesting we hold off on a public reaction. Susan sat silently, pondering our next steps, then began to sob. I hugged her, and we both cried, unable to hide our pain anymore. That night, I met Bonnie at the door, hugging and kissing her. I half expected her to pull away, but she kissed me back. I couldn't detect any trace of aftershave, just her perfume. Despite my anger, I told her dinner was ready. I told her that it was ready, and that Susan and I had already planned to get takeout because neither of us wanted to cook. We joked about poisoning our spouses, but it was just a way to vent, not a real option. The next morning, I watched Bonnie get into Rich's car. I called Susan and asked her how it went. "No problem," she replied, joking and planning to help me keep my cool. "Any idea where they're going tonight?" Susan always has a bit of a temper and needs to vent. We had to be honest about our feelings at 10:00 a.m. We were in the office of one of Susan's bosses, Jake, a divorce attorney and an old friend. He agreed to represent us. "Are you sure you have a video showing both parties?" he asked. We assured him we did, but chose not to show it yet. "As long as you have evidence of infidelity, you're good to go," he said. "Your prenuptial agreements are strict, Rob. Did you consult a lawyer before signing?" I explained that my father insisted on a legal opinion, and Susan used the same document. "Jake, the cheater only gets 20% of joint assets, including savings," he continued. "And investments, there aren't any provisions for personal income accounts. Do either of you have any hidden income?" We shook our heads. "What if Bonnie has money she didn't tell me about?" I asked. "Common property," Jake replied. "Like if you bought something without telling her. Home improvements can be tricky. Your homes are protected because they were gifted before marriage, but things like solar panels might be considered common property, so she only gets 20% because she's a cheater, right?" I asked. "I'm willing to give her that. We can. We need to talk about how to split the furniture and other stuff. If she wants to take anything, she'll have to pay for transport and storage." Jake grinned and said, "These are the games we play. The important thing is your ironclad prenups. As long as you can prove infidelity, keep the video copies hidden and confidential. If they sue over the video being public, it depends on how it was obtained." "Be careful," he said, and we nodded. We thought about editing the video and sharing it with our friends and family, but we were worried about the impact on our kids, so we were more determined to find out who filmed it. We decided to serve the divorce papers on Thursday at noon, but I suggested waiting until Friday afternoon so they would have to worry all weekend without legal advice. Jake convinced us to stick with Thursday, saying it would save costs and still keep them busy with financial statements. We were pretty worried about the impact on our kids, so we were really keen to find out who'd filmed it. We decided to serve the divorce papers on Thursday at noon, but I suggested waiting until Friday afternoon so they'd have to worry all weekend without legal advice. Jake convinced us to stick with Thursday, saying it'd save costs and still keep them busy with financial statements. We probably would have increased their legal fees if we'd served them in person to watch their reactions, but Jake advised against it. Instead, we decided to serve them at work in front of their colleagues. After leaving Jake's office, we went to the bank to transfer money into new accounts in our names only. We made sure we had statements for all accounts, and we paid off and canceled credit cards, opening new ones in our names only. I checked my email and found 3 more videos of Bonnie and Rich. I thanked the sender and asked how they got the videos. I was secretly hoping they would be released, but I knew we had to be cautious to avoid a lawsuit. An hour later, I received an email with an address, 9203 Victoria Street, apartment 2011. I went to the address and convinced the woman at the counter to give me information by implying the tenant was involved in criminal activities, and she gave me the details. The apartment was rented by the insurance company where Rich and Bonnie worked, with Rich's signature on the contract. I wondered how the company would react if they found out we're paying for Rich's affair. Bonnie called me at 12:30. Furious about the divorce papers, I calmly told her I knew she had found someone else and was setting her free. We had practiced what to say. Bonnie angrily denied the affair, accusing me of believing rumors and threatening to take everything in the divorce, including custody of the kids, child support and half of our assets. She suggested Rich could move in with her and I could live with Susan. I imagined what they were doing in my house. "Go ahead," I said. I was pretty furious about the divorce papers, but I told her I knew she'd found someone else and was setting her free. We'd practiced what to say. Bonnie denied the affair, accused me of believing rumors and threatened to take everything in the divorce, including custody of the kids, child support and half of our assets. She said Rich could move in with her and I could live with Susan. I imagined what they were doing in my house. "Get yourself a lawyer," I said. I barely kept my voice steady, struggling with the regret of my marriage falling apart in anger at her stubborn denial. I hope Susan hadn't revealed too much to Rich, by the way. "The girls are packing your things." Susan told the boys to pack Rich's things. "Everything will be in front of the house for you to pick up this afternoon. We got a restraining order and changed the locks this morning. You'll have to find another place to stay until, get yourself a lawyer," I said, trying not to shake. I barely kept my voice steady, struggling with the regret of my marriage falling apart in anger at her stubborn denial. I hope Susan hadn't revealed too much to Rich, by the way. Susan told the boys to pack Rich's things. "Everything will be in front of the house for you to pick up this afternoon. We got a restraining order and changed the locks this morning. You'll have to find another place to stay until the court decides." Bonnie started yelling, so I hung up. 10 minutes later, Susan texted me. "Bring your cooler, make sure it's full. That fool Rich." She began sipping her beer. He tried to blame it on some secretary's gossip. I told him Bonnie did the same. He denied everything, said we shouldn't believe ITA told him to get his stuff, really. I told him to call first because I had a loaded weapon. Jake will be here soon with 2 sheriff's deputies to keep. I realized things could get out of hand. I thought it was a good idea to have deputies there, in case Rich tried to provoke me and I'd end up in jail for assault. I was already panicking, like in an emergency. Susan continued, "I'm glad you talked to the kids earlier. I couldn't have done it without breaking down. We gathered the kids and I told them what was happening. Surprisingly, they seemed to expect it and started packing Bonnie and Rich's stuff. Susan said I thought things were getting out of hand, so I decided it would be smart to have deputies present. I figured that Rich might provoke me, and I could end up in jail for assault. I was already in a controlled panic mode, like during emergencies." Susan continued, "I'm glad you talked to the kids earlier. I couldn't have done it without breaking down. We gathered the kids and I told them what was happening. Surprisingly, they seemed to expect it and started packing Bonnie and Rich's stuff. Susan said the kids took it surprisingly well. Maybe they're in shock or don't realize how it will affect them." My phone beeped with an email. I wonder if it's from Pissed Off 999. I said check it. Susan insisted she showed me how to open it, and we listened to an audio file. Can you believe it? Robert and Susan served us. Bonnie said they must have found out somehow. I can't believe this, just last night Robert was so affectionate. Relax, Rich replied. They don't know anything. I'm sure someone's been gossiping about us having lunch or driving together. We need to deny everything. If they go through with this divorce, we'll make them pay. I know a lawyer who'll help us, just don't admit anything, act like everything you say is being recorded. After listening, Susan and I were silent. Okay, let them think we don't know anything, I said. Rich mentioned they've been planning something for a long time. We need to ensure we're protected if they go through with this divorce, we'll make them pay. I know a lawyer who'll help us, just don't admit anything. Act like everything you say is being recorded. After listening, Susan and I were silent. Okay, let them think we don't know anything. Rich mentioned they've been planning something for a long time. We need to ensure we're protected if they do something illegal. Susan nodded. Tears in her eyes. We have to hold firm. I know. Susan said quietly. Jake said I'm in a better position. Courts favor women, but I can't accept Bonnie getting custody of Jason and Deary and living in your house until Deary turns 18. Even with the prenup, it's terrible if she lives rent-free while you pay child support. I felt the same, but hugged Susan as she cried. I assured her we would come out victorious, though I wasn't sure. Divorce is all about minimizing losses. The kids weren't saying much as Susan and I went into the house. Deirdre and Cindy were packing Bonnie's clothes into suitcases and bags, now using plastic bin liners. I asked them to take pictures of the luggage, planning to apply its value to Bonnie's share of the assets. The boys were almost done. Rich had fewer clothes, and the boys were stuffing them into bags rather than folding them. I smiled as Rob stuffed a $2,000 suit into a bag. They had my back. Bonnie texted me and I called Jake, who showed up with 2 sheriff's deputies. Jake told me to relax and enjoy. Bonnie and Rich arrived with another familiar face, Budrow Landry, a bully from elementary school. "Hey," Robert Burrow smirked. "I hear you're having trouble with your wife and son Bonnie texted me and I called Jake, who showed up with 2 sheriff's deputies. Jake told me to relax and enjoy the moment. Bonnie and Rich arrived with another familiar face, Budrow Landry, a bully from elementary school days. "Hey, Robert," Budrow smirked. "I hear you're having trouble with your wife and son-in-law. No big deal. If I had a weapon, I would have shot him." Budrow was huge, and fighting him wasn't an option. "Budrow, we're just trying to work it out. You don't seriously think my boy Rich is with your wife, do you?" Budrow asked, grinning. "That's the story," I said. Jake moved closer. "I can't deal with it. Bonnie accused me of taking all the money from our bank account." "Yes, and I have statements showing that it's no big deal, but if I had a weapon, would have shot him." Budrow was huge, and fighting him wasn't an option. "Hey Budrow," I said, "we're just trying to work it out. You don't seriously think my boy Rich is with your wife, do you?" Budrow asked, grinning. "That's the story," I said. Jake moved closer. "I can't deal with it. Bonnie accused me of taking all the money from our bank account." "Yes, and I have statements showing the original amounts. You'll get what you're owed. She didn't know her credit card would no longer work. Susan and I didn't accompany Rich and Bonnie into the house. Deirdre and Cindy followed Bonnie and a deputy, ensuring nothing funny happened. Jason and Rob followed Rich. "Where's my jewelry?" Bonnie asked. This was a major point of contention over the years. I bought her high-quality jewelry worth at least $25,000. Most of it was locked in my safe. I took pictures of Bonnie's ring and necklace for insurance purposes. I wanted proof of ownership. Budrow started to argue, but stopped when I explained I took pictures to prevent the jewelry from going missing. Jake stepped in, suggesting a new appraisal of all assets. After consulting with Budrow, Bonnie calmly removed her jewelry and handed it to me. "Where am I supposed to go?" she asked. "You, Bonnie." I nearly suggested her lover. Most of it was locked in my safe. I took pictures of Bonnie's ring and necklace for insurance purposes. I wanted proof of ownership. Budrow started to argue, but stopped when I explained that I took pictures to prevent the jewelry from going missing. Jake stepped in, suggesting a new appraisal of all assets. After consulting with Budrow, Bonnie calmly removed her jewelry and handed it to me. "Where am I supposed to go?" she asked. "You're on Victoria Street," but I held back. I shrugged, realizing my emotions had shifted days ago. I loved this woman, but now I felt nothing but anger and coldness towards her. Bonnie and Rich finally left with Budrow following. I wondered if they were heading to the apartment. Jake smiled. "I hope so. We have someone following them. If we reveal the apartment now, it will help our negotiations." Instead, they went to the Holiday Inn near their office. Cheerfully, I helped them move. Nest was on Victoria Street, but they held back. I shrugged, realizing my emotions had shifted days ago. I loved this woman, but now I felt nothing but anger and coldness towards her. Bonnie and Rich finally left with Budrow following. I wondered if they were heading to the apartment. Jake smiled. "I hope so. We have someone following them. If we reveal the apartment now, it will help our negotiations." Instead, they went to the Holiday Inn near their office. I helped them move their things inside. I needed more flash drives for backups of the audio and video files. Susan and the girls were making dinner when my phone beeped with another email. Susan followed me to the computer. "Okay, guys." Bud's voice said, "Someone's probably following Robert." Stay at a motel and get a room with 2 beds. Make sure both beds look used. The investigator can bribe the maid to check. We'll say you're sharing a room to save money. It was embarrassing when I needed more flash drives for backups of the audio and video files. Susan and the girls were making dinner when my phone beeped with another email. Susan followed me to the computer. Okay, guys. Bud's voice said, someone's probably following Robert. Stay at a motel and get a room with 2 beds. Make sure both beds look used. The investigator can bribe the maid to check. We'll say you're sharing a room to save money. It was embarrassing when my card was declined. Rich said, good thing I took extra cash. What's next? I'll call the credit card company to open a new account. Roberts thought about jewelry. Budrow continued, he likely has a list of protected assets. They're legally community property, but what Robert and Susan don't know about, they can't claim. Don't hide too much. You might get caught if you have a secret bank account. Make sure it holds only a small amount. Offshore accounts are better. My card was declined, so Rich said it was a good thing I'd brought extra cash. What's next? I'll call the credit card company to open a new account. Roberts thought about jewelry, but Budrow continued. He probably has a list of protected assets. They're community property, but what Robert and Susan don't know about can't be claimed. Don't hide too much, you might get caught if you have a secret bank account. Make sure it only holds a small amount. Offshore accounts are better. You don't want to be caught lying under oath. Bonnie asked, what about our Baton Rouge accounts? Screw that, Rich exclaimed. We'll fly to the Cayman Islands and open an account there. Make the room look used. Wet the tissues. Ruffle the towels. Wet the shower. Use some shampoo. I'll call the office and say we're off tomorrow. The audio file ended. Do they have secret bank accounts? Susan sighed. Where did the money come from? I see the bank statements. He couldn't. I've got a lot on my plate right now. Bonnie and I got $50 a week for travel expenses, and we both checked the credit card statements every month. I told the apartment woman that Rich was into pills and Khorasan as a bluff, but now I'm wondering if he's hiding something more. We decided to leave it for tonight, and meet the kids for dinner. There wasn't much we could do about hidden bank accounts anyway. The next morning, I drove to Jake's office, having arranged a jewelry appraisal. Bonnie and I had already gone through the credit card statements each month to see if there was anything strange. I told the apartment woman that Rich was into pills and Khorasan as a bluff, but now I wondered if he was hiding something else. We decided to leave it for tonight, when we would be joining the kids for dinner. There wasn't much we could do about hidden bank accounts anyway. The next morning, I drove to Jake's office, having arranged a jewelry appraisal and an estimate for my firearms from a local dealer. Susan went to work briefly, and we met at Jake's office, where I played the audio files from the previous day. I'd like to know who's sending these. Jake said. How they bugged Bonnie and Rich in the hotel is beyond me. A private investigator couldn't have done it that fast. We might need a judge's order to find their bank account balances, which could mean hiring an investigator. Susan and I shook our heads when Jake asked if we'd noticed any missing money. Susan and I shook our heads when he asked if we'd noticed any missing money. If you want this divorce quickly, like you said, we'll move fast. Next week, we'll meet with Bonnie, Rich and their lawyer to list assets, then go before a judge. Louisiana's Napoleonic laws make divorce easier, especially with proven infidelity. Counseling won't help once the judge rules. You'll. Jake played the audio files from the previous day. I'd like to know who's sending these. Jake said how they bugged Bonnie and Rich in the hotel. I'm at a loss as to how they did that. A private investigator couldn't have done it that fast. We might need a judge's order to find their bank account balances, which could mean hiring an investigator. I asked if they'd noticed any missing money. If you want this divorce to go through quickly, like you said, we'll get it done fast. Next week, we'll meet with Bonnie, Rich and their lawyer to list the assets, then go before a judge. Louisiana's Napoleonic laws make divorce easier, especially when there's been proven infidelity. Counseling won't help once the judge has ruled. You'll have to wait 6 months and it'll be over. Jake added that Budrow had called, demanding you release an extra 30% of the money you withdrew. I reminded him that the prenup states the cheater only gets 20% of the assets. He demanded proof of infidelity, which will present in court. It was amusing to see him flounder. I'd love to get an audio tape of him advising. Hiding money offshore into the courtroom. I had to work that weekend, as Sharon couldn't cover my shifts. What if I start coughing and need a test? I asked. Idiot. Sharon said, yes, I could fill in. You have vacation and sick days saved up. Take an emergency vacation if needed. I can't believe Bonnie did this to you. How about I work this weekend and start my vacation on Monday? I suggested. Really, thank you. I owe you one. I'll start your sick leave and then vacation. Take as much as you need, and keep me posted, Sharon said. Working was a welcome relief. Weekends were busy, but ICU staff had to stay alert. I was surprised to see my father. I said, hey, Dr. Pran, what brings you to the ICU? He cut the crap and said, I'm here to see my father-in-law. I know the staff will be curious, so let's just talk. He hissed in the head nurse's office. He asked what was up with me kicking Bonnie out. She called her mother sobbing. I found out Bonnie is having. I told him that I'd found out that Bonnie was having an affair with my sister's husband. I'm dealing with a family crisis. He looked shocked. You're telling me, he said, what are you going to do? I decided to be open with him. I've got proof in the form of video and audio files. I've got the kids to tell you, too. What are you going to do? He asked, already sounding concerned. I'm going to talk to the head nurse, I said. I'm going to get to the bottom of this. I told him everything, despite our history. I haven't told anyone except my lawyer and my sister. I haven't even told Bonnie and Rich everything, let alone the kids. I said, holding back my emotions. I have proof, video and audio files. This isn't just a rumor. Dr. Pran looked shocked. What are you going to do? He asked softly. I know I shouldn't get involved, but I'm worried about the kids. I'm trying to protect them, but I can't just ignore this. John, what would you do if Bonnie had proof that I was cheating? I'd want your head on a platter. I'd help her bury you. He said, honestly, with tears in his eyes. What about Jason and Deirdre? How are they handling it? He asked. They're talking more with their cousins than with Susan or Methy seem to be holding up, but they're angry with Bonnie. I told them they need to talk to her, but I don't know if they have. I'm not getting involved. I thought you were overreacting to gossip, John said softly. My first priority is to protect. They're chatting more with their cousins than with Susan or me. They seem to be coping, but they're angry with Bonnie. I told them they need to talk to her, but I don't know if they have. I'm not getting involved. I thought you were overreacting to gossip. My first priority is to protect Jason and Deirdre, I said softly. I'll help Bonnie with her physical needs. I don't excuse her behavior, but if you have irrefutable proof, I accept it. Stay in touch. You're an honorable man. He walked out, shoulders slumped. I felt more sorry for him than for Bonnie. Wow, Susan said when I got home. So he knows his daughter isn't so virtuous. We need to tell Mom and Dad soon. How about tomorrow night after your shift? We don't want them to be mad at us for keeping them in the dark. I agreed. The meeting wasn't pleasant. My father only asked if I had proof, and I assured him I did. I liked John. He was more concerned about the kids than us, which I understood. In our culture, children come first and adults deal with the consequences of their actions. Children are protected but informed to learn. I received no additional information from my mysterious benefactor, which was fine. I had 4 explicit videotapes showing Bonnie and Rich, along with audio recordings proving their long-term relationship. In our culture, children always came first and adults dealt with the consequences of their actions. Children were protected but informed to learn. I received no additional information from my mysterious benefactor, which was fine. I had 4 explicit videotapes showing Bonnie and Rich, along with audio recordings proving their long-term affair. I didn't need more proof. Bonnie not only cheated, but also financially defrauded the family. The mystery of how she saved enough to fly to the Cayman Islands infuriated me. She was a thief and a fraud. Jake began investigating their accounts using social security numbers, ensuring we could subpoena statements if the money was missing. Some questions were answered the following Wednesday, when we met to list our total assets. A court-appointed financial arbitrator reviewed the paperwork. I provided my annual salary and Bonnie's pay stub. Bonnie made $5, Jake said that my salary was $000 a month, and that it varied with overtime, but that we earned similar amounts each year. He said that this would allow for minimal alimony, even without the prenup and infidelity proof. On Monday, the auditor asked for our income tax returns for the past few years. I found them on our desk, while Susan had to get copies from her accountant. She was upset that Rich hadn't filed them with the other documents. She knew Rich earned about $80,000 compared to her $50. Jake said this would allow for minimal alimony, even without the prenup and infidelity proof. On Monday, the auditor asked for income tax returns for the past few years. I found them on our desk, while Susan had to get copies from her accountant. She was upset that Rich hadn't filed them with the other documents. She knew Rich earned about $80,000 compared to her $50,000. She was pleased when Jake said she'd likely get a big maintenance payment. Budrow entered the conference room with a sulky Rich and Bonnie. Bonnie glared at me, her anger surprising me. I expected an apology, but she remained silent, likely on Bud's advice. Rich struggled to keep a neutral expression. The court officer introduced himself and his assistant, who took notes and kept an electronic record. Let's get started. Your attorneys have forms for you to sign confirming that your statements rewrite the text in a way that's appropriate for a casual business context. 000 and was happy when Jake said she'd likely get a big maintenance payment. Budrow entered the conference room with a sulky Rich and Bonnie. She glared at me, which surprised me. I expected an apology, but she didn't say anything, probably on Bud's advice. Rich struggled to keep a neutral expression. The court officer introduced himself and his assistant, who took notes and kept an electronic record. Let's get started. Your attorneys have forms for you to sign confirming that your statements today are true and may be admitted into evidence. Our goal is to compile a list of all assets and income for the judge to review. We won't discuss prenuptial agreements today. Regarding car valuation, we'll use the standard blue book. If the car your child drives is registered in your name, we can consider it separate from community property if both parties agree. We'll get to the money later. Let's start with Mr. and Mrs. Fno listing automobiles, firearms, the boat and household goods. Bonnie's jewelry wasn't an issue, either. I had it valued and it was worth more than my truck and firearms put together. Budrow said the solar system should be considered separately, so he prepared a document outlining its value and depreciation. Jake reviewed it, made a few notes, and nodded. The 401k accounts were listed. I asked why they shouldn't be excluded, thinking they should be. No, they count since you've been married over 10 years, but in your case, the values are similar, so it's not a big issue. Jake replied. We then looked at the checking and savings accounts. Jake entered the statements showing I'd taken 80% of the funds, and did the same for Susan and Rich. It's straightforward, said the auditor, Mr. Jacobs. There's a big discrepancy between Mrs. Fontano's salary estimate and her tax returns for the last 2 years. Rich tensed up. I've estimated each of you earned $600. I explained I multiplied her monthly salary by 12. Yes, but for the last 2 years, Mrs. Fontano reported an income of $140,000 a year. I couldn't believe it. What the hell? The assistant asked, frowning. Didn't you look at your tax return? I shook my head and explained that Bonnie and Rich had a new accountant handle our taxes electronically. I just looked at the small refund we got. Bonnie turned purple. Her salary includes $80,000 in bonuses each year. Mr. Jacob said. I looked at Budrow and Mr. Jenkins got $110,000 in bonuses each year. Jacobs continued. Susan asked how much extra that was. Net, about $80,000 a year, totaling about $16,000. So, Bonnie, where's the money? I demanded. Is that why you went to the Cayman Islands last Friday, to hide it? Bonnie angrily asked, how did you find out? Are you following me? She then composed herself. No, I didn't need to. I said you did it yourself. Both you and Susan insisted that the kids install phone locator apps. Jason and Dre used it to track you when you didn't answer them on Friday. They saw you reappear near the coast, suggesting you were in the Cayman. Bonnie and Rich looked astonished. They checked your office on Monday and saw you weren't home, but in Baton Rouge, likely transferring money into new accounts. I added, Jake, speak up, buddy, we can get. Bonnie looked shocked. They saw you near the coast on Friday, so they figured you were in the Cayman Islands. Jake spoke up. We can get statements to prove those account balances. It's illegal to hide money offshore to avoid distributing joint assets. Bonnie began to cry. Hiding assets like this is a felony. Even Rich looked scared. Jake turned pale. I didn't do anything like that, man. He looked at the recorder and Jacobs' assistant, who was typing away. Susan asked Jake, can we get them to return the money? Jake nodded, yes, we'd get our share in the end, even if we have to confiscate their paychecks. 80% of those accounts will become yours once infidelity is proven in court, but there's no money left, exclaimed Bonnie. Jake, can we get them to return the money? Susan asked, looking at the recorder and Jacobs' assistant typing away. Jake nodded, yes, we'd get our share in the end, even if we have to confiscate their paychecks. 80% of those accounts will become yours once infidelity is proven in court, but there's no money left, exclaimed Bonnie. It disappeared when we tried to transfer it. Rich tried to silence her, but she continued. I think you stole it. She accused me. I looked at her incredulously. I didn't know for sure about the money until recently. I suspected it, but I had no idea of the amounts. What are you claiming now? Did you spend it all or lose it? Both are nonsense, she said. Rich tried to shut her up, but she kept talking. I think you stole it, she said at me. I looked at her, like, what? I only found out about the money recently. I thought something was up, but I had no idea how much. What are you saying? Did you spend it all or lose it? She said they tried to transfer the money electronically at the bank in Grand Cayman, but it was declined. So they went to Baton Rouge to look into it. The online statement showed the transfer, but there was no routing number or account details. Just give me the bank information for the Baton Rouge account and I'll look into it, said Mr. Jacobs. I can get the results faster and enter them into the court documents. Rich and Bonnie left the room looking dejected. Susan wondered where the money went, and I shrugged, sharing her thoughts. Our case was expedited, likely because Bonnie and Rich had begged Burrow to speed things up. They stayed at the Holiday Inn for a, said Mr. Jacobs. I can get the results faster and enter them into the court documents. Rich and Bonnie left the room looking dejected. Susan wondered where the money went, and I shrugged, sharing her thoughts. Our case was expedited, likely because Bonnie and Rich had begged Burrow to speed things up. They stayed at the Holiday Inn for a week before moving to the apartment on Victoria Street. It amused me to think about them in their love nest, likely struggling with cash flow and BU's fees. All 5 children insisted on attending the hearing, and I agreed, since they were affected by the divorce. Jake explained what to expect. Judge Goody conducted his hearing the week before we moved into the apartment on Victoria Street. I found it amusing to think about them in their love nest, probably struggling with cash flow and BU's fees. All 5 kids insisted on attending the hearing, so I agreed, since they were affected by the divorce. Jake explained what to expect. Judge Goody conducted his hearing semi-formally. Sitting at the table with us, Jake, Susan and I sat to Bud's left, with Rich and Bonnie across from us. The kids sat in the gallery. Following Jake's lead, we stood as the judge entered. He waved for us to handle family cases in a I explained that I handle family cases in a semi-formal setting, and that when I address you, you should sit and speak, raise your hand if you want to speak, and be on your best behavior and respectful. I told him that if he saw fit, he would throw me out. The kids found his last statement funny, but I've reviewed both cases and normally we treat these as separate matters, but the evidence and parties involved are the same here. A sibling is accused. He said that in a formal setting, you should sit and speak when I address you, raise your hand if you want to speak, and be on your best behavior and respectful. He said that if you piss him off, he'll throw you out. The kids managed to hold back their laughter at that last statement. I've reviewed both cases. Normally, we treat these as separate matters, but the evidence and parties involved are the same here. A sibling is accused of infidelity in Louisiana. While infidelity alone isn't grounds for divorce, there are prenuptial agreements that affect property distribution in such cases. Therefore, I'll need irrefutable evidence of infidelity first. There were discrepancies regarding monetary assets, with allegations of hiding funds. My investigation shows that Mrs. Fontano and Mr. Jenkins have bank accounts in Baton Rouge with balances of $120,000 and $160,000 respectively. The whole balance was transferred from these accounts on the Monday before the divorce petition was filed. The correct passwords and security questions were used, showing the transfers were made by Mrs. Fontano and Mr. Jenkins or someone they authorized. Looking into it some more, we found the money was split evenly between 5 accounts belonging to their children, Jason and Dear Danto and Robert Dave. The money was transferred from the accounts the Monday before the divorce petition was filed. The correct passwords and security questions were used, so it looks like Mrs. Fno and Mr. Jenkins or someone they authorized made the transfers. It turns out the money was split evenly between 5 accounts belonging to their children, Jason and Dear Danto and Robert Dave, and Cynthia Jenkins. These transfers are legal under the Uniform Gifts to Minors Act. The accounts were set up years ago, probably for college or income in the event of a parent's death. I was stunned. Why was Bonnie making such a fuss if she had given the money to her children? The judge continued, saying that the parents showed responsibility, if not remorse, by giving the money to their children. Such deposits are rewind a minute, though. These transfers are totally legal under the Uniform Gifts to Minors Act. The accounts were set up years ago, probably for college or income in the event of a parent's death. I was stunned. Why was Bonnie making such a fuss if she had given the money to her children? The judge continued, saying that the parents had shown responsibility, if not remorse, by giving the money to their children. Such deposits are non-refundable unless fraud is proven. Does anyone have proof of fraud? I was thrilled, and I would have liked my 80%, but knowing the money was divided among the children was satisfying. Rich and Bonnie looked shocked, suspecting we had outsmarted them. When Judge Goody asked if we had proof of fraud, we all shook our heads and said, "No, Your Honor." "Honor, I'm not saying you're guilty of fraud, but if you are, you'll have to pay it back, unless we can prove you're lying." "Yes, Your Honor, I read that children over 15 can choose which parent to live with." Right, next up is the question of custody of the minor children. The judge said, "My daughter, Deirdre, raised her hand." "Yes, Your Honor. I read that children over 15 can choose which parent to live with." "Honor, they seemed terrified of possible charges for hiding money overseas." None of them appeared willing to rebut the judge's remarks. The judge said that in some states, children over 15 can choose which parent to live with. "I consider the children's opinions after speaking to them privately," Judge Goody replied. "I don't need to talk privately. My mother cheated on my father, and our entire family. I want to live with my dad." Jason stood up and agreed. Robert, Dave and Cindy also stood, stating, they wanted to live with their mother for the same reason. My heart was pounding as I squeezed Susan's hand. "I'll consider your wishes," Judge Goody said with a half-smile, "but it hasn't yet been established that there was, as you put it, treason." Deirdre raised her hand again and the judge turned to her. "I also read that a 16, I'll think about your wishes," Judge Goody said, smiling a bit, "but it hasn't been proven that there was, as you put it, treason." Deirdre raised her hand again and the judge turned to her. I also read that a 16-year-old can ask the court for emancipation and 17-year-olds can leave home without a petition. Yes, the judge replied. The 17-year-old rule is an old law for young men wanting to join the army without their parents' permission. For a 16-year-old to ask for emancipation, they must be able to support themselves. Is that clear? Deirdre nodded. I've got a college fund with another $56,000 in it. 000, plus what my parents and grandparents contributed. Cindy stood up, me too. Collectively, we have plenty of money to live on our own for a long time. Her brother Dave stood and smiled, me too. We could rent a nice place together. Jason and Rob stood up and said that if they pulled their Jake stood up and said that if he and Cindy didn't get the money, they could live on their own. Cindy stood up too, and so did her brother, Dave. They could all live on their own, they said. Jason and Rob stood up and said that if they pulled their money, the 5 of them could live on their own. The judge looked like he was about to laugh, but he stopped himself. He said, let me guess. If I don't go along with your wishes, you'll all petition for emancipation or leave on your own. The 5 heads nodded. Sit down, he said. I'll consider what you said. There's an allegation. The judge looked like he was about to laugh, but he stopped himself. Let me think about it. If I don't agree with what you're saying, will you all ask to be emancipated or leave on your own? The 5 people nodded. Sit down. There's a claim of cheating in this case, which affects the prenuptial agreement and how property is shared. So, I'm going to ask for proof of cheating. Jake stood up. Your Honor, I have these pictures of Richard Jenkins and Bonnie Font together. Budrow objected. Anybody can change photos. I have a picture of me shaking. Jake, Your Honor, I have these pictures of Richard Jenkins and Bonnie together. Budrow objected, saying that anyone can alter photos. I have a picture of me shaking hands with the president, and another of us playing golf, made by my son. It's a joke, Your Honor. The defense counsel hasn't identified the source of this evidence. Judge Goody looked at Jake, then at Susan and me. Jake nodded for me to respond. Your Honor, the evidence came from an anonymous source. I received several. Jake nodded for me to respond, saying that the evidence came from an anonymous source. I received several video files and took these screenshots from one of the videos. I have the full video on a DVD and thumb drive. I looked at Rich and Bonnie, who appeared shocked and agitated, shaking their heads in disbelief. Judge Goody observed their reactions, noting their purple faces in clear distress. Okay, do I need to reproduce the file Mr. Fontano provided, or do all parties agree that there was infidelity? Judge Goody asked. Budrow wanted to see the footage, but when Bonnie and Rich quickly pleaded with the judge not to show the video, he backtracked. Could you spare a minute for my clients, he said. Your Honor, after consulting with them, reluctantly said, we agree with the plaintiff's claims. Well, in that case, I will announce my verdict. Since all parties agree infidelity occurred, the marriage contracts will be honored. In each case, Susan and I were awarded 80% of the community property. Judge Goody suggested we discuss the actual distribution with our attorneys to avoid court involvement in the details. For custodial parents, I grant Robert Fontano full custody of Jason and Deira Fontano, and Susan Jenkins custody of Cynthia, Robert and David Jenkins, as requested. Custodial parents have full visitation rights, legally speaking. The divorce will be finalized in 6 months. Bonnie's increased income means she'll have to pay me $1,000 a month. The increased incomes mean that Bonnie will be paying me $1,000 a month and Rich will be paying Susan $2,000 a month. Custodial parents have full visitation rights, legally speaking. The divorce will be finalized in 6 months. Bonnie will have to pay me $1,000 a month and Rich will have to pay Susan $2,000 a month for the next 3 years. Each dependent child will receive $500 a month until they turn 18. Jake said the payments were minimal and suggested we could appeal, but I decided against it and Susan followed my lead. After the judge ended the hearing, we left. Jake said he would arrange a meeting to work out the details of how we would divide the property. I told the kids to go home, change and wait for me for a family meeting. Susan and I walked to the back of the courtroom, where my father was. "So, when did you figure it out, Dad?" I asked Susan, who looked puzzled. It hit me when Deerer and Cindy made those comments about the video. I said to Susan, pissed off. 999 is a personality the kids invented. Susan's mouth dropped open. "No, Dad. I figured it out a few days ago when I saw an old credit card bill. Jason and Rob asked me 2 months ago for a credit card to plan something special for your anniversary. They promised to reimburse me about $500. The statement showed a purchase. I didn't pay much attention at first, but when I called the electronics company, they told me the kids had bought mobile phone bugs. They spent $500 on spy devices. I asked them if they were expensive, and they said they were. Their dad didn't know where they got the video cameras. He followed me home to find out more. All 5 children were waiting in the living room. They fell silent as we walked in. I said, "Let's go to the kitchen and sit down." I went to the kitchen and got 3 beers, handing one to Dad and me, and one to Jason. I didn't pay much attention at first, but when I called the company, they told me the kids had bought mobile phone bugs. They spent $500 on spy devices. I asked, yes, apparently they were expensive. Dad didn't know where they got the video cameras. He followed me home to find out more. All 5 children were waiting in the living room. They fell silent as we walked in. "Let's go to the kitchen and sit down," I said. "I'll get us a couple of beers. I'll get one for Dad and me, and one for Jason and Rob. And you can have a beer, too, Susan," they said, grinning. "You may be old enough to be spies, but not old enough to drink." Okay, who wants to start? Let's begin at the beginning. Deera, it all started when Cindy and I stopped by my mum's office, and she wasn't there, nor was Uncle Rich. This was around the time they began phase 2 of the COVID lockdown. We thought we could get some money from one of them to see a movie. The receptionist said they were out. We'd left long ago, and it was well past lunchtime, so we decided to track them. We have a locator feature on our phones that my mum insisted on installing. It showed they were at a strange address, so we checked it out. It was an apartment building. When we arrived, we saw Uncle Rich's car and waited. They came out later, walking hand in hand and smiling, which got us thinking, so we started tracking where they went. Over the next few days, they returned to the same place and we stayed for about an hour and a half each time. Sometimes they went there late at night after work, but before going home, we told the boys about it. Rob continued, "We searched the internet and found bugs you can insert into cell phones after downloading an app. It works like a continuous phone call in the background and doesn't interfere with regular calls. It does drain the battery a bit faster, though. It transmits all the sounds around the phone, so you can eavesdrop." We talked, pop into. We each spent about an hour and a half there. Sometimes we'd go there late at night after work, but before we went home, we told the boys about it. Rob continued, "We searched the internet and found bugs you can insert into cell phones after downloading an app. It works like a continuous phone call in the background and doesn't interfere with regular calls. It does drain the battery a bit faster, though. It transmits all the sounds around the phone, so you can eavesdrop." We talked, "Pop, we'll use your credit card to buy them." Sorry, we lied a bit. It was easy to install the bugs in the app on their phones. We took turns checking them and eavesdropping on conversations. We recorded anything interesting to share later. So that's clear with the audio recordings. But how did you get the video and find out which apartment they used? I asked. We looked at their keys. They both had a key marked 2011. That's not their office number, so Jason copied his mum's key. We went into. We checked out the apartment a couple of times and had a look around. We decided we needed cameras, so we bought a few and added a small transmitter. Dave said it was pretty cool, and the boy was excited about the technology. He didn't notice he was describing the end of several marriages and the breakup of 2 families. At least Susan and I got some answers. The cameras were motion sensitive, so they didn't burn too many batteries. We hid the receiver under the couch. The receiver got information from the cameras and sent it to our receiver, which recorded it. It seemed so. You just took a quick video of Bonnie and Rich doing it, right? You also recorded some audio files and sent some to me. I spoke carefully, saying that they were my kids, my nephews and nieces. I couldn't ruin my relationship with them, but there was another issue, money. Dad, when Cindy and I first looked at that. So, you took a video of Bonnie and Rich doing it, right? You also recorded some audio files and sent some of them to me. Spoke carefully, saying that these were my kids, my nephews and nieces. I couldn't ruin my relationship with them, but there was another issue, money. Dad, when Cindy and I first looked at that apartment, I realized that our mum was gone. De'Ara stated, well, not gone, but not back to where our family used to be. They had some clothes stashed away, and Mom had some outfits that I recognized. She also had a makeup kit, towels and washcloths. We knew what they were doing. They'd work out, clean up, and I realized our mum was gone. De'Ara said, well, not gone, but not back to where our family used to be. They had stashed away some of her clothes, and she had some outfits I recognized. She had a makeup kit, towels and washcloths, too. We knew what they were doing. They'd work out, clean up and then come home to you and Aunt Sue like nothing had happened. We were all furious. They weren't just cheating you and Aunt Sue, they were cheating us, too. Now about the money. The secret bank accounts were a side issue. Cindy said that when we looked around the apartment, we found some bank account papers. There were instructions on how to access it online. It took a while to find the actual accounts. We even spent time in Dad and Aunt Bonnie's offices, peeking in on them a couple of times. The receptionist let us in to wait for them. She giggled. We looked through a bunch of folders. We finally found one in the bottom drawer of Dad's desk with some applications. Then we looked in Aunt Bonnie's office and found more papers. Aunt Bonnie had a small notebook in her handbag with passwords and stuff in it. It didn't say, secret bank account, but we could tell the password was unusual, much more so than the one she uses for her mobile. It took a while, but eventually we realized it was the right password. They were using the same password for both accounts. Jason took control of the situation. We already knew they were up to something. We found out about their secret bank accounts and we were pretty annoyed. We wondered if they were dealing drugs or embezzling money. Dave suggested putting money into our accounts. Dave blushed. I said we can't let Dad and Aunt Bonnie get rich and leave us hanging. We read about dividing assets in a divorce and we didn't like the idea of them keeping half the money. We had accounts set up by powwow, and I thought maybe we should take all the money. I thought the cops might catch us, but since we were minors and it was we thought we could get away with it, so we did it. If we'd known about the 80-20 split, we probably wouldn't have taken it. De'Ara said, regretfully. It actually worked out better that way, and then you guys started sending me video and audio files. I said, looking around the table. I was at least a little relieved to see an expression of restraint rather than outright pride. That was the hardest part. Jason said quietly, we were really, really mad at Mom and Uncle Rich for what they were doing to all of us. We didn't want to hurt you. And Aunt Sue, but we couldn't do anything, so we sent you that first video. We tried to get you to visit Mom and Dad a few times. We knew you were upset. If you'd pulled a weapon out of the safe, we would have told you everything. We'd tell Aunt Sue. We'd already moved on. We thought we'd moved on from the money your mum hid. I think we stole it, but we figured it was only fair because she cheated us. I hope you and Aunt Sue weren't too upset. I looked at Susan, who had a look of amazement on her face from the start. I hope you kids never get mad at me and Sue, I said. I said with a smile, but if you ever catch me like you did your mother and Rich, I'll punch you. The loss of life, even if it's with my walker in a nursing home. They all chuckled at my threat. You'll never have to worry about that, Daddy said. Dearie, you'll never let the family down. We Sinjin. We're a close-knit bunch. I am still scratching my head over something though. My dad said you bought cell phone bugs with my credit card. They were really expensive. Where'd you get the money for the video cameras? Yeah, they cost about $500 each. They shoot full video with sound and have built-in motion and sound detectors. We got 5 of them, replied Jason, plus another $500 each for a hidden transmitter that sent a signal to a receiver we hooked up to Deer's computer. That's a total of $3,000. $500 plus shipping, but we can get half of that money back if we return it undamaged. We've already taken all the cameras and the transmitter. We probably lost the cell phone bugs, though. As for the credit card, we used Dad's Visa card. I didn't have a Visa card, so I said I would apply for one. I forged your signature, said Jason. At least he was honest enough not to look guilty. It has a $10,000 limit. We bring in the mail every day, so hiding it was easy. Dearie, Cindy and I set up an email account. Pissed off 999 Rob came up with the name. He said what Mom and Uncle Rich did made him mad. The kids smiled and nodded, seeing that Susan, Dad and I were really impressed. So the bugs in the cell phones are still active? I asked Dave. Nodded yes, they work as long as the cell phone batteries are charged. Thanks to that and the phone location app, we know where they are and what they are doing at all times. Dave was thrilled when he realized they weren't in trouble. If one of them is talking on their cell phone, we can hear it. It's voice activated, so it's a lot of car. They work as long as the phone batteries are charged. We know where they are and what they are doing at all times thanks to the phone location app and this. Dave was thrilled when he realized they weren't in trouble. If one of them is talking on their phone, we can hear it. It's voice activated, so it's a lot of car sounds and business talk. We took turns going through the files to pick out anything important. I demanded access to the audio recording. As a result, Susan and I had advanced knowledge of Bonnie and Rich's demands at the property division meeting. Bonnie was so eager to get her jewelry that she gave me most of the cash and all of the housewares. We agreed to some of their requests, but not all of them. Susan surprised everyone, except me, when she suggested that they walk across town with signs on their heads saying that we'd cheated on our spouses. The alternative was to appeal the alimony and child support amounts. I thought Bud's eyes would pop out of his head. I was pretty shocked when Susan suggested they walk across town with signs on their heads saying we cheated on our spouses, but I thought Bud would be livid. At that point, Budrow told them they got off easy on the child support payments and warned them that Susan and I would likely appeal the amounts. Susan eventually recanted, forcing them both to apologize on their knees. I don't know exactly how it happened, and I'm willing to swear on a stack of Bibles that I had nothing to do with it. A couple of months after the hearing, the insurance company that Bonnie and Rich worked for found out that he'd rented an apartment as a love nest with company money. Weirdly, everyone in the office had got insurance for the past 2 years, but Bonnie had them way higher than usual each year. And Rich got big bonuses too. So, 2 months after we found out, the insurance company that Bonnie and Rich worked for found out that he'd rented an apartment as a love nest with company money. Weirdly, Bonnie got much higher premiums than usual each year, and Rich got big bonuses too. No one ever figured out why. When all this got out, he and Bonnie got fired, but it wasn't a big deal. The company didn't want any publicity, and none of the videos ever made it to the internet. Susan and I couldn't have cared less, and we joked over beers that it would have been fun to make them stars. But the kids didn't want to embarrass themselves in public, so we totally get why they got fired. The company didn't want any attention, and none of the videos ended up online. Susan and I weren't too fussed about it, and we used to joke about how it would have been cool to make them stars. But the kids didn't want to put themselves out there like that. We get it. Bonnie and Rich are now in New Orleans, working for a small shipping company. Since they moved to the Big Easy, they don't really see the kids that often, and they barely even call. Last I heard, they're having a tough time paying child support and alimony. We hope they do well, but, maybe not.